It's a month of gratitude, and we are grateful that you're here today. We've got an incredible guest speaker who's about ready to come out. He's going to serve two duties. Eric is not with us this Friday, so our guest is our guest host and our guest speaker. He is a dear friend of the CFE, a wonderful alumni of the University of Michigan. I think many of you will recognize his photo if you didn't already gather this from his name. We've got Richard Louie in the house today, you guys. He is a news anchor, he is a film director, best-selling author, DEI advocate. He's here to talk to us about the selfless economy, maybe Mrs. Fields cookies, maybe aircraft, I don't know. Richard, you are amazing, and we invite you to come out to the stage. Everyone, big round of applause for Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Richard. We'll see you in
discussion.
discussion.
And great walk on. Great to see all of you. How's EHour doing today? Yeah, fantastic. And we're just all lucky there's no snow. I'm only back here maybe 3 times a year, and I was like, where's the snow? It's not here yet. So today we are going to look at industry disruption part 1. And later on in December, I'll be back, and we're going to have a great conversation. Eric and I have been talking about that sit down and some of the topics we can go through. The idea of this gathering today is to kind of take a step back and surf at around 50 to 80,000 feet and take a look down into some of the ideas that you're considering either in the businesses that you are already operating or that you are thinking of operating. And the idea of disrupting potentially that which we think is dominant thinking in the spaces that have been provided to us. For some of you, these ideas may already be in your bloodstream, and for others, it may be interesting to test the business ideas that you have already considered. For me, when I look at my background and the stories, they asked me to sort of share how I got into originally what was startups in Silicon Valley, and then moving to Michigan, and going to business school, doing another startup, then going to work for Citibank, and then changing careers and becoming a news anchor. And now doing different projects in media, what kind of got me to where I was. And so these stories that you heard from both Ramita as well as Sam were very similar in many of the things we've done, maybe not altogether the same though. For me, I started what I say my first academic experience was at Cookie College. And as Christine said, I worked at Mrs. Fields Cookies. I did not go to college. I did not like college. I get kicked out of one high school, almost got kicked out of my second high school, almost flunked twice. But for some reason, I didn't flunk. My high school principal actually came and found me out and said, Richard, if you don't go to summer school, you won't graduate, even if you take a summer school classes after. I still did that, and by the grace of the principal, I was able to graduate. But I hated education, so I went to Mrs. Fields, and they would send you to Cookie College, just like there's Hamburger University. Anybody know Hamburger University at McDonald's? One person. All right. You have as well? Did you work at McDonald's before you started going to school? Okay. So these are the places where you learn management skills. So I was a store manager at the age of 17, and then I did that for 4 or 5 years. I realized I could not be the top cookie, if you will, for forever, but I did end up as a counter person, and then on the 4th year, before I went back to school at City College of San Francisco, I had the largest cookie store in America, which meant we sold $1 million worth of cookies. That's a lot of cookies. And I started at number 10 in the country, and there's 500 units. But I stuck with it, and through Cookie College, I learned a lot of the business practices and the culture of management very early. And one of the things that I bring up very often is that I had to fire probably about 50 people in the time I was there. And for any of you who've worked in a place where you've had to fire somebody, it is one of those crucible moments where you go, I don't really like doing this. I thought we all could work together. And that was very instructive to me later on in my startup when I had to fire our CEO and our leader for my startup. And that was very strange for me. But some of the lessons you learn along the way, you never know. And I learned it at Cookie College. That was my first college, if you will. Then I went to UC Berkeley. At City College of San Francisco is where I took a speech class. And I went from a person who did not like to stand up and talk in front of people to doing speeches about, I did one about constipation. We were just talking about this earlier, and it was one of the ones I did for the school, and we actually won a lot of awards across the country because I was doing an informational speech about constipation. You never know where the road's going to take you. Then I went to Berkeley. Berkeley rejected me, and the reason why I went to Berkeley, or why I wanted to go there, is because of writing, creative writing. And Berkeley rejected my application. I was pretty upset, and so I wrote a one-letter protest letter, a one-page letter, I mean to say, that protested the fact they rejected me. Because I said, I am an older student, I am 22 now, and the whole purpose of the master plan of education, like it is in Michigan and in California, is that we support those who are later on in education and are returning. The cookie college folks, if you will. And they did not let me in. So they got the letter. I spent a whole long, like weeks, 1 week on it, sent it in. 2 weeks later, I got the fat envelope. I got the acceptance. And I realized when I read that one-page letter, it was far better than my horrible essays that I had put together for my application. It was much more driven as to why I wanted to do this. But I had to stand up and fight for that. And then I ended up here at Michigan Ross so that I would move away from small startup tech companies. I started out in pneumatic technologies, then moved on to fintech, and I was tired of small businesses. So I was going to come here to Michigan Ross so that I could work at a strategy consultancy anywhere in our great country, any one of our great cities. And what do I do once I hit here? Is I do another startup. And that's because at a place like this, as you are learning, you come in with an idea, and then your head gets cracked open, hopefully, if you talk to other people, and you have great mentees, and you listen, and hopefully you walk out of here thinking a little bit differently and potentially doing something very different. I did not come to this great business school, this great university, to then return to the space from which I came from. But what happened here is through all the different people I got to speak with, all the seasoned experts and those who had made mistakes at higher and different levels than myself had taught me, you know what? Why not go back and create this first ever bank-centric payment system? And so that's how Michigan Ross turned out. And then you can see in business the different spaces that I ended up was in data recovery early on. Citibank, AI, I've worked on a whole bunch of different tech brands. Then I changed and I move on to the fourth estate. Work at Channel News Asia. Anybody here from Southeast Asia? Do you know Channel News Asia? Yeah? That's because I told you to say that. It's okay. No, it's in Singapore. We're in Southeast Asia. Thailand. Okay, so real close by. So Channel News Asia is in 20 different countries. It is a CNN-like network that tries to do CNN-like stories in English. And that was my first jump, because after we sold this fintech model that we had done through Michigan Ross and launched through Michigan Ross, I wanted to, take a different direction. And because I woke up the next day, do I want to come back to New York and work in strategy consulting? And I was like, maybe not. I think I kind of figured out that mousetrap. I'd done it like 1 year or half a year even at that. And I just felt like once I got the mousetrap figured out, I don't need to go back and do that again. And you may discover that in your summers. Anybody do that after your summer? And you're like, I don't need to go back to that? Yep. See, that's great because you did the summer. And if you didn't do the summer, you didn't try it out. What if you did that after you graduated, right? You've been, oh man, I'm stuck in this job now for 2 years at least, right? And so that's what I figured out by working in strategy consulting. I didn't want to go back, so I picked the most obvious, right, next job, and that's to become a news anchor. And I remember calling my dad, and I said, hey, Dad, I just finished, this really cheap education at Michigan. It's only like $60,000 a year, not including, all the living expenses. And now I'm going to not use it, and I'm going to become a news anchor, and I'm going to make, listen to my math here, negative $35,000 in the first year. Because I had to pay back my signing bonus from the strategy consulting company. And I was making $35,000 my first year as a news anchor at Channel News Asia. Don't tell anybody, I'm not supposed to talk about these compensation packages out loud. But that was a reality. And my dad laughed at me. And he said, I always knew that you were a little different. That's the zig while others were zagging. And that began my career. And what I said was, if I could not use and learn from Channel News Asia enough to come back to America where I really wanted to do news on a national level, then guess what I could do? I have a great education from the University of Michigan that I can go back to. Right? I can go back to strategy consulting because you all know that's not going anywhere. Consulting is always going to be there for you. It's a great finishing school. And so I went for it, making a lot of money. Then I applied to CNN. They said no. For my first two interviews, I went in there. I remember my interview the first time out at CNN. I sat at the desk, and the desk where CNN Worldwide reaches, the way I like to tell it, reaches 500 million people, and that's where I had to sit to do my screen test. And they said, you sit down, and what's going to happen is the teleprompter is going to move. And as it moves, just read it, and I'll get in your ear. And so you're all set, Richard? Yeah, okay, I'm all set. So the producer walks away, and I'm sitting here, and I'm reading the prompter. I said, okay, I've done this for now a whole year and a half at Channel News Asia. I got this. And the prompter's going, I'm reading. She gets in my ear and she says, Richard, this was during the supposed advertisement. There's a breaking news story. A plane went down in Siberia. I was like, what do you mean a plane went down in Siberia? I'm supposed to read the prompter. She said it went down. So let me give you the details. When we come back from the advertisement, this is what I want you to do. This is the story. It is a small 737. We don't know the number of people on it. And we do know it's in Siberia. And we'll get you more details when we get them. I said, okay, that's fine. I was sweating. I was like, there's these different exercises we do as anchors where we'll go, and if you're singers, any singers in here, you know what this is. We do bumblebees, bumblebee, 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 just to loosen yourself up. We do this other thing where we put a pen in our mouth, and so we talk like this, and we do the script like this. And what it does is it strengthens your lips so that when you talk, you can really get it down. And I was using the paper because I didn't have a powder puff with me, because everybody uses a powder puff in here, right? No? Yeah? Okay, one person has a powder. Who has a powder puff? And that's a different question. So I didn't have that with me, and so I used a piece of paper, and I wiped off all the sweat. And I didn't care how I looked, and I was doing these other things to kind of loosen up. I went on, I did the breaking story, just into CNN. We have news of a plane that went down in Siberia. It is a single-aisle plane. We have no other details at the moment. When it does come in, we'll update you right here on CNN. Now back to our regular programming. Oh, I thought I did really well. Turns out I did not get the job, and I was talking to my agent, and my agent said, so why didn't you get the job? I said, well, I did the breaking news. There's no problem. And what he said was, well, what did you do? I said, well, I described the whole thing about the sweat and my exercises and the bumblebee, bumblebee, bumblebee and all that. And he says, that's why. Because the executives who are watching you during your demo don't care about when you're on camera. They care about when you're off camera. That's how they can tell how good you are at being a person as a news anchor. That's how you're going to figure it out. And so the lesson I learned from that I wanted to share with you is a lot of times we think what we do on camera is what really counts. And to you, as you're going through your business career and your ideas, it is going to be what's off camera. It is going to be what you're doing and the way you're doing things when others are not looking. Because what happens when you're on camera is really the easy part, isn't it? It's really the place where we prepare everything. So think about that as you are going through your different, as you're creating your business, putting together your business plans, and you're doing your presentations. What's going to be a great on-camera performance is actually going to be what you do off-camera. Then I've spent so far a lot in community, and I think that the importance, as I know that in this class, in the EHour, as well as what you do at Michigan, is you are given a certain honor and grace in the idea of being chosen, which I'll bring up shortly. Who volunteers in the room or commits time in the community in any way in this room? Right? It's kind of the culture, right? And would you say that you learn a lot from it that you can use back in, right? And it's the amount of lessons that we learn in these spaces is really, I think, underreported, if I can say that. And so my effort with the platform that I have is to translate this over to this, because these are all intertwined. And so where that leads me today is my main gig is my side gig, my side gig is my main gig. All the things that I do in these other spaces in community or thinking about a broader societal question and answer has switched. And a lot of times what you'll do is you'll think your main gig, if it doesn't satisfy all of your needs, then you're really pissed off, aren't you? Then I made the wrong choice. But I think if we approach our main gigs as not being perfect from the get-go, then our expectations will be lowered and therefore our satisfaction will go up. And I wish I knew that. I only learned that maybe it took me a long time, maybe 8-9 years ago, when I realized I could not be Tom Brokaw and I could not be the anchor on NBC Nightly News. I thought I was a failure because my main gig was not the perfection I had applied to it. In reality, it was meant never to be that way. And when I saw that with my parents and their careers also, they said, oh, I don't know why. Like my dad was a pastor and a social worker. He would come home and say, oh my God, work's not so good. They don't respect me, and I'm not the perfect 100. At church, he was like, they're not giving me the 8 o'clock service. I don't know why he wants to get up so early, but they didn't give it to me. They give it to somebody else. It wasn't perfect. And what I learned from them and myself in my own journey is if we can go in knowing that most often our main gig won't be perfect, that's okay. Anyway, back to this. Main gig is my side gig is my main gig. And whatever variation in between as you work through that stuff will probably be a great mix and a greater outcome of what you will find satisfying overall. Don't put all of your eggs, as they say, in one basket. And this caused me 7 years ago to start Priska, which is a not-for-profit where we've worked on action-based narratives, hopefully at the highest level with a focus on distribution outcomes. Being a Ross grad, we are taught to be being a Michigan grad, be very on the ground and very results-oriented. I think all of us would agree that that's the culture here at the university. And that will take you long and far. The research, or I should say the surveys, have shown most hires at the executive level, when they think of Michigan, they think of one major thing. They think of the fact that you hit the ground running. That's really special. That means you know how to get things done more than anybody else. Always, we've ranked so high. And that's why the focus on action-based narratives, I want to drill down a couple levels as to what I mean, because those 3 words by themselves can seem very poofy, right? Very squishy. And how many Ross students are there in here? I know there's one here. Okay, about 15. So you know where I got action-based from. Very clear, is from my education here. And through that, I've been able to direct 2 feature documentaries, 1 book, a series of studies on inclusion at work, 7 studies, PSAs on violence, and I should say bystander intervention, as well as young military caregivers, which is coming out soon. Strange things, right? Just don't seem to fit into what I've discussed so far on this slide. But I knew that my side gig became more important to me, that the main gig was giving me abilities that I could not leave used in the spaces that are important in our society. And so as you work on your main gig, I know that you'll be aware of what this capability, this skill, this technology, this service, this product can do in one application, but think of the broader context as you go along. And don't wait, as they say. Well, there's 2 ways of life that your speakers may have said so far. You wait to make your millions, and then you give back. Have you heard of that model before? Go out and make your fortune, then you can really help people. The other way is to help people along the way. And that's a deep question as you go out there. Which is the right model? Question for all of you, which is the right model? Any thoughts on it? Oh, that's good. We have a mic.
Oh, okay.
I was going to come out and, give the mic, but I won't do that to you.
Like if you're making your money in a way that's actively helping people while you do it, like you're creating something that's actually bettering the world, then you're already doing it as you go. But if you're becoming super rich by like exploiting people, then honestly it doesn't really matter like how you give back. You're already taking away from people, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. You moved. Sorry, you moved, so everybody's gonna be like, but you moved. What's your thought on that?
I think you need to give back when you are making money.
Why? There's no right or wrong answer, by the way. I'm just interested in what your thought is.
Yeah, because if you get money first and you try to give it back, it looks like you absorb money first. It's like a gathering process first.
Yeah.
It's not like...
It's really a continuum, isn't it? It's like similar to what you were saying. It's like there's a lot of inputs to this question. I'm giving you simplified ends to the conversation, aren't I? But it's not that simple. But it's something we all need to think about along the way. Oh, there you go, right there. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Right there in the middle, Gray. Right. Just she can't see you.
You'll never give money back after making it if you don't practice it along the way.
What do you mean?
Well, giving money isn't just an outward thing, it's an inward thing. So if you're so attached to it when you're making it, because anybody that makes a lot of money is attached to it, then you're never going to give back.
If you allow me, then a follow-up question is, do you think the way, if you are giving money, is it, and there's 2 ways that folks will talk about it, is it smart money and not smart money? What do you think's, how do you balance that? Smart money being, as you give, you're going to be also giving your brain in terms of how they spend it. You're going to help them learn how to spend it too. Versus you just give them the money. What's your thought about that continuum?
Well, my opinion is that you always do smart money when you're giving.
Great. Good stuff. Appreciate it. Right here in front, and then over here, we'll go quickly. Sorry, you're going to have to run it right down here in front. She's like, man, it's making me get exercise in.
I feel like also like the motivation behind the money giving, if you're trying to build your own personal brand, if you have made a lot of money and you try to give out money, that increases your personal brand. But like if you're doing it out the sake of your own heart, like it's just how you believe, like how the action like of giving money, do you perceive it as something as like a decision for a business purpose or a decision for like your own self, it's hard to distinguish because like, for example, tax returns, if you give money, you can write that out as a tax deduction because you're giving away money.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing you have to consider.
Isn't that okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's just something.
What if I'm Travis Kalanick, and I'm going to give away lots of money because I have horrible headlines during Uber? What? Isn't that okay? Because it's still helping people.
I don't know. It's complex.
Yeah, he went to UCLA. It doesn't matter.
Oh yeah.
Oops. All right. You see what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I believe in the practice of continuous giving, whether that be through acts of service or through acts of donation. I believe it's kind of more of an inbuilt process and a personally driven thing. I believe in the U.S. we have tremendous buying power. So if we donate 5 to 10% of our income, we won't notice it out of our own pocket, but that money has so much buying power and going to impactful charities that actually are fiscally responsible and can be, their impacts can be actually traced. And I see that as a way of doing tremendous amounts of good.
Yeah. Really great responses. Thank you all for raising your hands because it's not an easy, it's this way or it's that way when it comes to thinking of giving and thinking of others. Although we like to think it's one or the other, because we are taught to think about in these 1 and 0 ways. And one of the things that I think we took away is there is also the idea of muscles, right? You were saying keep on giving because you start to learn. You're saying keep on giving because you learn, right? You develop an acumen about where you didn't do so well in helping and whether you did better, right? And that's true, and that's very, very fair, which is the topic that I'd love to talk about today, which is this sort of opening that we've got based on, and keep that in mind again about what we were talking about, philanthropy, as well as giving into the community, about business and what it can do in new business and startups in the space. We're in a unique space, I think, because these are the inputs, I believe, that are driving this unique space. First of all, we are living through a selfish pandemic. As a journalist, I've covered more mass shootings. I think if you were to count the number of hours I've stayed on air doing mass shootings either here in the United States or abroad, I'm probably in like the top 5. Just the number of hours I've had to talk about who the suspect is, the number of bullets, number of those injured. And it's not something anybody wants to say is, well, look, I've done so many hours about people getting killed. That is the epitome of us being selfish, isn't it? That my view is so strong, I feel I can take somebody else's life. We have in other ways that are not necessarily as savory, whether it be political discourse or it's me and my view. And there's not a left or right or middle thing. It's just politics is more than that. For you poli-sci majors, as you know, the idea of politics is the decision and the distribution of scarce resources for all. And notice what I said at the end, for all. Theoretically, that's what we should be doing. And you poli-sci majors know that. That's exactly what the beauty of politics. But that's another space where I have reported on in the last 5 elections on the national level, where I've watched as the discourse has become very selfish. That's one thing we're living through right now. The second thing that we're living through that drives sort of a unique environment, something that you in your formative years have lived through and are unfortunately or fortunately experts on as you develop new business models. This is the other dynamic that you are the erstwhile experts in as you think of new things, as you think of new mechanisms of services and products. We had 2 billion people that sat out, by the way, the economy. 2 billion workers stayed at home at the same time. 4.5 billion people were at home. There is no other time that we have seen this. You know that, but the numbers are staggering. 2 billion workers at home. Yet we bounced back. We did amazing things. My company, we're in TV, and at 30 Rock, we actually were able to keep on broadcasting. Everybody had a home studio. We were able to do it with minimal technology. Yet, what you saw at home was not necessarily terribly different. And that's like 90% of our broadcast. For 2 years, we were not going into the studio. We were able to provide vaccines and healthcare to all of our company employees. We were able to have pets and spouses and brothers and sisters walk around behind us as we were going through business meetings, and it was no big deal. We were able to share pains. We were able to cry together. We were able to laugh together in ways we didn't do before. In business? In media? Wait, this is New York at 30 Rock. We're not supposed to be that. But we were. That's just one story, though, isn't it? About what we did in the last 5 years that business has never done before. Businesses, that's just one industry. And we can go on and on and on. I won't go through a lot of examples today, just because of the time we have. But if you just go out and look at either startups like Form Labs, you look at established companies like Patagonia, and others that continue to operate in ways and in resilient ways coming out of that time period. Those who made X and then during this time made Y so that we could live, that we could survive. And they all did it. That leads to this rare opening that I believe if we so choose to look at it and see it, it's a rare opening and therefore a calling potentially. And that rare opening is what I'm calling the golden rule capitalism opening. Those three words never come together, by the way, golden rule and capitalism. But I'll get to that a little bit more in a second. But what I believe the opening is that when the market right now is favoring industries that create selfless competencies and operations to reach efficient societal outcomes. And it's because of this perfect storm that we are living through. Let me dig into that perfect storm a little bit more in a second. Many of you might be familiar with the Dutch East India Company. Anybody learn about that in your history class or in any of your business classes? Well, I have my notes to make sure I get it right, because for me, it was one of those examples that really stood out. It was the 1600s, and it was that great modern multinational company that traveled the seas. In the 1600s, it was the company that brought together international commerce, the Dutch East India Company. And what it was doing, it was Dutch, for those of you who can't read, and if it's not so obvious to you. And they were able to, during that time, be able to provide different citizens of different countries the resources that their particular region did not have. And it was the beginning of the idea of international commerce and the distribution of resources and services that specifically really products to different parts of the world. And they were dominant for about 2 centuries. They were seen as very beneficial to international commerce. And as the first multinational company, they were also the first major monopoly. Well, as part of maintaining that monopoly, they were building forts, they were maintaining armies, they were negotiating treaties, this as a multinational company. And it doesn't sound like one, it sounds like a polity, doesn't it? And they were making, basically, business the envy of the world. If you were to value the Dutch East India Company today, it would be worth almost $8 trillion. Unfortunately, by the 1700s, that company became corrupt. It saw the growth of the African slave trade, colonization, and it exploited native populations in order to keep its dominance in a multinational environment. They were then known at that time in the late 1700s as that evil, rapacious company when they had started as this amazing product of, at that time, an open market, but worth $8 trillion. Now, how much is $8 trillion? Well, today, $8 trillion would be equivalent of all of these companies together today. That's how big the Dutch East India Company was. So it started helping society. It ended up instead creating the ills and supporting the ills of society. And as we were talking just a second ago about how business can look outside itself, this is the danger of what we must remember and try to avoid. The thing about the cataclysms that I brought up earlier, and that's the word I want to bring to what we lived through COVID, as well as through the selfish pandemic. And after cataclysms comes something amazing, new industrial eras. If you look at, number one, the steam industrial revolution, what was the cataclysm? These massive transatlantic political revolutions and mass migration. We had steam power at the time in the 1700s, what I was just talking about. After that was 2.0. We had Civil War, Reconstruction, and mass migration. That led to our mass production that we saw at the turn of the century. And then for 3.0, it was the Cold War and the end of the Cold War. We were so good at building killing machines, and when we no longer had to build killing machines at the end of the Cold War, what did our great minds do? They turned to the digital revolution, what we call 3.0. Because all that great mind power and brain power to create one type of mechanism turned to do something else. And this is the result that we live in today. And so where we're at in 2023 is potentially 4.0. And why 4.0? Again, the idea of an existential challenge that has torn down things, and therefore we are beginning to build things up at the moment. And those great cataclysms that we've lived through are the ones we've already talked about. The global pandemic, there's the Arab Spring, which the United States lived through in the last 5 years. It's not often in political circles people would say the Arab Spring started in MENA and now has moved to North America. But it has, hasn't it? That idea of a new, completely different idea about the way we're going to think about politics. Climate change and mass migration. And therefore, is this industrial era that we're in some sort of harmonic of things that we've never seen before? And as we look at the industrial hallmarks, each one of them had different industrial hallmarks. Today, I suggest there are 5: healthcare ubiquity, interfused business, workforce elasticity, energy acceleration, and space markets. And there could be more. But this is a very important part of why I wanted us to discuss today's situation, because we are in a big, grand opening potentially. Basically, because of what we lived through in the selfish pandemic, and as well as COVID and the restructuring of the way business has worked, the hypothesis is that we are now in this golden rule capitalism or capitalist period, when the markets favor the industries, as I said earlier, that create more selfless competencies. And I think that we have not yet sat to codify that which we went through in the last 5 years. We also have had a racial reckoning period which we have never had before since the 1960s, globally, not just in the United States. All of these things are saying we're in a new space that we're looking at things differently. The business models are saying that. The hallmarks that I brought up earlier are also bring up that potential idea. I'm going to stop there. And in the 3 minutes I guess I have, you're probably going to quiz me on this because I wasn't able to drill down on it. But this idea that we are in this golden rule capitalist space, the idea of doing unto others as you have done unto you, is really, truly, I think, in front of us. Because businesses started to do that in the last 5 years. I reported on them, and I saw them as well. All right, in the 2 minutes, I know some of you are going to run. Any thoughts and any points or questions?
I think this is something that the original instructor that didn't show up today would ask. What is a skill that you recommend that we build along the way so that we can start looking for those golden rule capitalism opportunities and thrive in them?
I would say if there is a group of 3 people that you absolutely believe you would never, ever want to talk to, make that list. And then sit and have a coffee or a meal with them. If it's either because of your bent based on your industrial perspective, if it's the concept of your business, if it's political, if it's anything, make the list and sit down with them. The only way you're going to test your ideas in reality as a practitioner, because you can't do anything alone, you have to do it with other people, is by understanding what that which you disagree with might be saying. Because in the end, you either will actually disagree with them, most likely you'll agree more than you'll disagree. And your model, whatever the model is around those spaces, will get stronger and more enlightened so you have a better outcome. That's what I would do. So by the end of the semester, make your list and go hang out with them because you absolutely disagree with them. And why is that relevant to this? Because I know that as a business practitioner and as a journalist, as soon as I put up golden rule capitalism, which are 2 very different ideas, I'm going to get a lot of people saying, oh, that's the wishy-washy stuff. What are you talking about? I didn't have time to get into the hallmarks or any of the other issues, but this is a very market-based perspective. Like I'm looking at the market first. This is not inside out. It's outside in. I think we have to let you all go. Is that right, Christine? All right, I'm sorry I went over. I thought it was 12:30, but